We used to think it was a slow-moving mistake of evolution. A peaceful, dim-witted plant-eater shuffling through prehistoric ferns. The fossil record tells a different story. In the Morrison Formation, paleontologists found an Allosaurus with a single puncture wound. Not to the ribs. Not to the skull. To its crotch. The bone had started to heal. The predator survived the initial strike. But the wound festered into a bacterial abscess that killed it slowly over weeks. The attacker weighed 5 tons. Its brain weighed 80 grams. For a century, we told ourselves the Stegosaurus was the gentle giant of the Jurassic. That its backplates served as armor against predators. We were wrong about almost everything. Those plates were not armor. They were not even solid bone. They were vascularized heat sinks, radiator fins pumping blood through a labyrinth of vessels to cool the body like an industrial cooling system on an overheating engine. Useless for protection. Designed for temperature regulation. The real weapon was always at the other end. How did a creature with a brain 57,000 times smaller than its body survive the most brutal mass cannibalism event in Earth's history? How did it outlast apex predators that were eating each other alive when the rivers turned to dust? Its name, Stegosaurus, means roof lizard. A mistake made by a 19th-century paleontologist named Othniel Marsh. He thought the plates lay flat like shingles. He was wrong about the plates. Wrong about the posture. Wrong about the purpose. He understood nothing about what he had unearthed. The Thagomizer. 4 spikes. 1 meter each. And a swing speed that would turn an apex predator's pelvis into powder. 90 miles per hour. That is the calculated velocity of a Stegosaurus tail in full swing. Faster than a professional baseball pitch. Faster than a cheetah in sprint. Faster than the human eye can track. At the point of impact, a single spike generated over 1,000 atmospheres of pressure. Enough force to punch through solid bone like a pneumatic drill through drywall. Not blunt force trauma. Penetration. Surgical insertion of a biological blade into whatever stood behind it. 4 spikes. Each 1 meter long. Not clubs. Not defensive bumps. Carbon steel katanas forged in flesh, swinging with the centrifugal fury of a hydraulic wrecking ball. The naming of this weapon came not from science but from comedy. A cartoonist named Gary Larson drew a caveman pointing at the tail spikes. The scientific community adopted the joke. Now it is official terminology. The Thagomizer. A blade designed to kill gods. Unlike most dinosaur tails, the Stegosaurus tail had no ossified tendons. No bony rods locking the vertebrae in place. It was an industrial pivot arm with 180 degrees of flexibility. This absence of rigidity was not a flaw. It was the engineering. A tail that could whip in any direction without structural limitation. A 360-degree kill zone surrounding the creature at all times. But the Thagomizer was just the blade. The real engineering was in the targeting system. For decades, scientists believed Stegosaurus had a second brain in its hips. A neural cluster to compensate for the walnut-sized processor in its skull. They were wrong. It was a glycogen body, an auxiliary power unit, flooding the nervous system with energy during combat. Not thought. Fuel. The creature did not need to think. It was a biological reflex system. A motion-triggered defense turret that did not require consciousness to kill. If Stegosaurus were alive today, it would be the second largest land animal on Earth. Larger than a bull elephant. Heavier than a delivery truck. But its brain? Smaller than a dog's. Its eyes were not built to see beauty. They were calibrated to detect movement in the shimmering heat haze of the Jurassic Plains. To track the silhouette of an Allosaurus against a blood-orange sky before the conscious brain even registered the threat. The tail was already moving by the time the predator committed to its charge. This was not a creature that needed to outthink its enemies. This was optimized brutality. A reflex arc wrapped in 5 tons of muscle and bone. The Allosaurus with the punctured pelvis survived the initial strike. The bone shows signs of healing. Weeks of attempted recovery. But the wound became a festering abscess because the Stegosaurus did not need to kill instantly. Its spikes were septic, covered in bacteria from the swampy Jurassic underbrush. A single puncture was a death sentence delivered on a delay. This is how a creature with a walnut-sized brain survived 10 million years of extinction-level pressure. It did not need to outthink its enemies. It just needed to make predation a suicidal gamble. One swing. One puncture. And weeks of slow, agonizing infection spreading through the body of whatever was foolish enough to attack. 10% of all fossilized Stegosaurus spikes show high-speed collision damage. Stress fractures. Impact scarring. These animals lived in a constant state of high-velocity combat. Not occasional defense. Routine warfare. The late Jurassic was not a paradise. It was a pressure cooker. Every dry season, the Morrison Formation transformed into a killing field. Riverbeds turned to boneyards. Forests reduced to ash. The largest carnivores on Earth, creatures built to dominate, began eating each other. The Morrison superdrought was not weather. It was a seasonal apocalypse that returned year after year for millions of years, culling everything that could not adapt to absolute scarcity. Imagine the weight of survival in a world where water was currency and every predator was starving. The Jurassic plains shimmered with heat. Temperatures that would kill a modern elephant in hours. The horizon choked with dust. The sky the color of dried blood. Sauropod carcasses littered the cracked earth, creatures the size of buildings, dead from thirst, their bodies picked apart by desperate carnivores turning on anything with moisture in its veins. The only sounds, the crack of bones, the hiss of blood-flushed plates cutting through superheated air, and the wet thud of a Thagomizer finding its target. For 10 million years, the Stegosaurus was the ceiling. The hard limit that predators could not break through. Its relatives went extinct. The smaller Huayangosaurus from China. The less efficient prototypes. All gone. But Stegosaurus endured. It survived the droughts. It survived the cannibalism. It only fell when the plants it ate began to disappear, a death not by predator, but by climate. The ultimate warrior killed by vegetables. 10 million years. A brain the size of a walnut. And a survival record that makes humanity's 300,000 years look like a rounding error. So what does that say about us? We mock the walnut-sized brain. We call it a biological glitch. A failure of evolution's grand design. But the Stegosaurus survived 10 million years of apocalyptic drought and apex predator pressure. Humans have barely survived 300,000 years, most of it in climate-controlled comfort. We tell ourselves that intelligence is evolution's greatest achievement. That consciousness is the goal. The pinnacle. The reason the universe bothered to exist. But what if intelligence is just expensive? A metabolic luxury that most of life decided was not worth the cost. The Stegosaurus did not need to understand its enemies. It did not need philosophy or planning or abstract thought. It needed only to destroy anything that came within range. And it did. For 10 million years. Remember the name. Stegosaurus. Roof lizard. A 19th century mistake by a man who thought the plates lay flat like shingles protecting the creature from rain. He was wrong about the plates. But perhaps he was right about the roof. Because for 10 million years, the Stegosaurus was the ceiling. The hard limit. The roof that even the most terrifying predators in Earth's history could never break through. Not through speed. Not through size. Not through cunning. The Stegosaurus simply stood there, tail coiled, plates flushed red, waiting for something to be foolish enough to try. Today, the most complete Stegosaurus ever found, a specimen named Apex, sold at auction for $44 million. The most expensive piece of biological history ever owned by a private individual. A 150-million-year-old weapon turned into a billionaire's trophy. If the most successful design in Earth's history was a brainless tank with a blade for a tail, a creature that dominated its world longer than most species exist, then what does that say about the value of the human mind?